Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. It is February 2nd, 2025. I'm Eric Murphy, and with me is my co-host, Tori Williams Douglas. Hey, Tori.
Hello. I'm making sure my mic's on. It's good to be here. Thank you for having me back. This is
Of
really exciting.
course.
Happy Black History Month.
Happy Black History Month. It's February, the shortest month of the year, which means that Black people get to have it.
I took some extra days. I started 2 days early and I'm going 2 days late.
Nice. I
So
like
for
that.
Black History Month, I'm like, it's actually the longest month of the year now.
I like that. I appreciate that. It has been one hell of a month, and I
Holy
want to
shit.
talk about it. I know that with as many discussions as we've been having online, as you've been having online, and just I want to get people to weigh in. I'm going to put the phone number out before we get into our discussion. That way people who
Yeah.
want to call can call in. We've got open lines and a call screener who is waiting to take your call. The phone number is 412-SKEPGEN. That's 412-753-7436. Or you can go to tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. That's tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. Yeah, we can't wait to hear from you. Okay, so it's interesting. I've done this since 2017.
Okay.
So that means that I've been doing these shows for 8 years and haven't really had a place to talk about politics because it's always been atheist skepticism stuff. And it feels really good to be able to just kind of do a bit of a recap and talk about things. But how the hell do we actually get into what has happened in this last month? For people who are watching this years from now, this is the month that Donald Trump got inaugurated and has started his first 30 days as in his second term as president. And
Where do you even begin?
so let's see. Do we start with the anti-DEI initiatives? The very expressly removing all of that kind of stuff, or do we go with requiring people to remove pronouns from their names, or maybe the return to work, office stuff? What has been on your mind?
Man, I mean, I think that the things that have been on my mind specifically are January. There were a lot of reports of ICE raids. Obviously, Trump has changed the Biden era policy that ICE can now enter churches, hospitals, make arrests in those places where before that wasn't allowed under Biden, even though in retrospect, the way that Biden was dealing with ICE and having them work, I do feel kind of guilty, I guess, for failing to recognize how egregious that was sort of at the time. Like I knew it, but it didn't really click for me. And then I saw all of these things about like all these ICE raids were like ticking up, and it's like Biden's still in office. This isn't Trump making these things happen, right? So like I'm watching throughout January, and it was like, okay, this is one of those things, right, where there's no good guys and bad guys, really. It's like it really is like you can look at it through the lens of harm reduction, sure, but in a situation like with immigration, both teams are the bad guys. I mean, like both teams are causing harm.
Absolutely. And I don't think that, if you're looking at Democrats and Republicans, Democrats, I don't think have had an opportunity to vote for somebody who's not hawkish in a very, very long time. You know, even when Hillary was running, Hillary was very, very hawkish, very aggressive when it came to that kind of stuff. And so, but they can enter churches? I didn't realize that. I want to see like a recut of the Hunchback of Notre Dame. You know, at the beginning, the sanctuary, and they go into the church, except this time, like, Frollo just walks in, movie over.
Yeah, well, and this is something that's really interesting. I was raised evangelical, right? Like you were too. And the idea in the old, there's this idea in the Hebrew Bible of sanctuary cities or haven cities, right? So if you are accused of a crime, there's a place that you can go and you can stay there and you're safe. And there nobody can do anything to you legally. And I don't know from a historical perspective how often these things are actually implemented. This is more this my understanding, it was more of an ideal. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's like it's very antithetical to like what these people claim to believe, which is a whole other kettle of fish that we don't have we don't even have to
Well,
engage with right now, right?
honestly, that's more my cup of tea. Where Christian values, or at least what I called Christian values
Right.
were, and how that has kind of formed into this tumescent mass of nationalist anti. Is it
Yeah.
anti-Christian, or did I just become like progressive enough as a Christian before I left that it feels anti-Christian? You know what I mean? Like,
Well, this is a great point, right? Because thinking about like Pete Hegseth has a tattoo that is literally honoring the Crusades, right? So I think that like fascism, before fascism existed, we had Christianity had this really horrific, violent streak of like God has given me the right to do violence against you for failing to uh, be Christian in the right way, to be holy and to be righteous in the right way,
yeah,
right?
Deus
And
Vult.
so
Yeah.
I left because I saw how much harm was being done. And, on my podcast, Go Home Bible, You're Drunk, we kind of joke that we followed Jesus out of the church. And I'm an atheist now, but I was like, nothing about evangelical politics aligns with anything that Jesus said, in my opinion. And I can't remember if we talked about this last time I was on, but like Jesus isn't even that great of a guy in terms of like, here's how to live your life. Like we have better tools now, right? We have better lenses through which to view the world than even
Yeah.
Jesus had at the time, right? So, but they can't even meet that level of just like kindergarten basic morality of don't harm other people. That's a bridge too far for them. And they have no interest in it, also. No interest whatsoever. And so,
Well, I
yeah, for
mean,
me, that's where I'm kind of like, oh, okay, you guys don't want to be like Jesus, I can leave. I'll be gone. Goodbye.
I I don't know. I don't know. I think that the character of Jesus, we don't need to necessarily talk about it historically, but just contextually, the character of Jesus is an interesting one because while at the same time, yeah, Jesus said turn the other cheek. It wasn't until the New Testament that you get hell,
Mhm.
which feels like the most violent thing anybody could possibly imagine.
Okay, I just need to say this.
Huh.
I'm going to get canceled for it. It's fine.
What's up?
But like St. Augustine, right, is kind of credited with a lot of the theology of hell.
Yeah.
And seeing as it's Black History Month, I'm just going to go ahead and say the worst black. That's what he gets.
Jesus. Oh
He's up there
God.
with like
I was
Clarence Thomas for me,
I was not
St.
expecting
Augustine.
that. I was not expecting that. Okay. Okay.
I'm canceling him. Like the idea of hell, nope, go fuck yourself. Goodbye.
Right? Yeah. I no, but you know what? What an interesting lens to kind of look at this through, right? Jesus said, "Give unto Caesar that which is Caesar." When the what was it? The Jewish Sanhedrin asked him, what about paying your taxes? And you have Christian nationalists who this month, through executive order on Trump's part, have pushed to try and end taxes entirely.
Okay.
Right? You saw that. Am I getting that wrong?
I mean, I didn't see it.
No,
I
no.
wouldn't be surprised.
There was an
I'm not saying
executive.
that you're wrong at all. I just think it's really funny because it's like they're too speaking of being hawkish, they're way too militaristic to actually get rid of taxes. Like, come on, man.
Well, I think they're
We need to
interesting.
bomb people, Eric. I don't think you understand.
So that part, I think, is next because the push to shift the economy. Trump trying to impose like war tariffs on our allies. I think that
Yeah.
the executive office, right, of the president has a very, very limited ability because a lot of the taxation stuff comes through Congress. Sorry for people outside of the United States. I'm trying to explain it a bit. But that changes under war.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can absolutely imagine that being a very useful way to shift that. Um, but that
Yeah.
said, okay, so geez, we've talked about quite a bit. Were there any other really there are so many things. I'm genuinely struggling to try and there was an end. So there was a apparently DEI was a presidential initiative that was put out that was repealed by Trump now, or
So
not DEI. What was it? Do you know what I'm talking about?
the presidential initiative. So there's a lot of levels to it, right? Like the problem is that they're calling everything DEI.
Yeah.
So parsing out what they're trying to get rid of has been really interesting. They're very blatantly trying to erase trans people from existence. And that's
Oh
getting
Jesus!
put under
I think I blocked that out.
that's been put under the label of DEI, of canceling DEI is trans people don't exist anymore, right? And so they're very much actively trying to do as much harm as they can that way. I believe it's like the passport, like the United States like passport issuing office no
Mhm.
longer recognized, like it doesn't say LGBTQIA plus, it now just says LGB.
Really, I didn't even know that one. And by the way,
That was like yesterday, I think,
shout to William
when I
Welsh
heard about that.
in the chat. Affirmative action. That's what I was
Oh
thinking.
yeah, affirmative action. That's yes. Sorry. Which is again funny because it's like just the way, yeah, he was like, we have to basically, you can not just allow, but if you're looking at this referendum of yeah, that he got rid of, it was Lyndon B. Johnson, I'm pretty sure, was where the affirmative action executive order came from, of like, you have to take affirmative action to make sure that you're not giving contracts to segregationists. And Trump's like, nope.
Yep.
You now have to take affirmative action to make sure you are giving contracts to segregationists. And it's like, oh boy, okay. But I think that people have been making really good arguments around this, that it's like we need to stop calling it like anti-woke or like anti-DEI, and we do need to start calling it segregation or resegregation, because that's those policies were put in place to mitigate what segregationists were doing. And so when you take away those mitigating factors and when you stopping segregationists, it becomes segregation. Just reduce your fraction, right?
Well, and we can definitely see that line very, very clearly from A to B. I know in my personal life, I've told you and I've talked on the air about it that Murphy is an adopted name, right? I wasn't born with it, and becoming a Murphy meant learning about the family that adopted me, and I found out that I have a grand uncle or great grand uncle who was a Supreme Court justice. And my aunt was very excited to share that with me. But you would think that would be like right at the front of what people talked about when they talked about the family.
No, you wouldn't.
You got this look
No,
on your
I
face.
wouldn't.
You got this look on your face. So I looked it up. Turns
boy.
out that was the Supreme Court justice who coined the term separate but equal. And can you take a wild guess what my aunt's political leanings are all over Facebook every day for the last 8 years? 12 years?
Oh, God. I know it's been so long. Okay. Separate but equal.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Oh boy.
You know,
Oh boy.
direct link, right? Yeah, of course, that's going to happen. Those people were there from the beginning, and they're here celebrating that after this many years they finally won, or at least they're thinking they won.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So, I want to put the phone number out one more time. I know that, yes, we are talking about politics, but we have other things we can talk about, including religion, why you left your faith, or, you know, just if you have a take and you want to talk about it, we want to talk to you. We do still have open lines, so I'm going to put the phone number up one more time before we continue. 412 SKEPGEN, that's 412 753 7436. Or you can go to tiny.cc slash SKEPGEN, that's tiny.cc slash SKEPGEN. I realize that it feels weird calling out my family. They fucking deserve that. Like,
This is so interesting because I think that, like, I mean, talking about the Supreme Court specifically, when people are like, "Oh, you know, there's a reason." I think that conservatives, and I was raised by an anti-abortion activist, so I was hearing everything that's happening now. I was hearing as like a small child, we need to take over the Supreme Court and get a bunch of anti-choice justices there so that we can ban abortion and do all of these other things in order to, you know, like we were talking about last time, dominionism, take the country over for God, have godly values, morals put into legislation. And, you know, in my mind, I'm just like, the overwhelming majority of the rulings of this like Supreme Court that we know about are horrific in the light of history.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, that's why they went for that specific spot in order to like get as much power and control as possible. That like they were like, this is why we're targeting the Supreme Court specifically, because it is capable of doing so much harm with so few people.
Yeah.
And obviously the strategy, it took 50 years for them to get to this point, but they did it. You know, they executed on it. And that was the thing that was this question I was asking when I was like first leaving church, leaving conservative republicanism, was I'm not aware of any 50-year plan that the Democrats want to execute on.
Yeah, and I think that we need to contextualize that is a side, that is a group of people who has been at war for 50 years. Does that mean that it's going to take us 50 years to, you know, are we going to need to plan that
No.
long?
We should plan for a really long fucking time. If we started acting like, okay, I believe I mentioned this last time, but I have volunteered for both Democrats and Republicans over my lifetime. Some of it was of my own volition. Some of it was my mom saying, you need to go out and like canvass for this, my friend who's running for city council or whatever. But no, it will not take 50 years. If we can start behaving if we can start behaving around politics and volunteering and getting activated and motivated and out organizing the way that Republicans do, I do think it'll be 10 to 15 years, but it won't be 50 years. And the cool thing is we have so many more books now. We have so much more knowledge. I mean, they're actively trying to erase some of it as we speak. That's another thing that they've been doing, is taking down a bunch of government websites, taking down a bunch of CDC data. I
did find out about that. Yeah. All trans resources and all of that were removed from the CDC's website. Right.
Yeah. And there are people who are, archivists have been working to put it other places online, which is great. I will also remind folks that there are other English speaking countries that have data on these things. So it's not completely gone. You know, they can't, like, the NIH is important, but like the National Health Service in the UK, for example, also has data. So please don't get too discouraged if you can't find something. There are other countries who are collecting this data as well, and collaborating with scientists and researchers in the US.
Mm.
So it's not. Please don't despair if that's something that's important to you. It's very important to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
As someone who, worked in a neuroscience lab, I understand the importance of being able to access your fucking research. That's huge.
Right.
Yeah. But we have data, we have research, we have all of these books on defeating fascism, on organizing. We have all this data on like even how to convince people of how to organize people who don't agree with you on a lot of things, right? You and I couldn't go out and have a conversation with someone about like the importance of voting. We couldn't go out and sit down with the Trump voter over a beer and be like, this is why you should have voted for Kamala Harris. But you know what you and I could do? We could go and we could sit down and have a beer with a Trump voter over the importance of unionizing your workplace. And we'd agree on 90% of that conversation. Right. And so if you take issues, like that's where data shows we can move forward with people who have been, I don't know, red pilled.
Yes. And I think if you have been red pilled, that implies at least that this isn't an opinion you've had your entire life. You got sucked into it. So
That's a good point.
There's hope.
Yes.
There's hope.
That's a great point.
Speaking of, that's actually a really good way to kind of segue into talking about unions, because I feel like I want to wallow in despair and it's not healthy, and it's not something that I want to push out there as the only thing that's going on, because there are things that we can do. And there was a thing that was pushed through. Trump has removed a key member of the government body that deals with union issues in the United States. Did you hear about this?
I missed that one also. There's so many things. That doesn't surprise me, though.
Well, so let's see. He's moved to cancel recent union agreements with federal workers.
Okay.
And he has removed one of the major. He's basically making sure that like the government piece in like approving unions is not functional.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that they realize that that was to protect the government and businesses. That was not to protect that was not to protect the businesses against the people. That was to protect.
Yep.
Sorry. If legal unions are not an option because they are being removed, that feels like the gloves are coming off after 70 years.
Yeah.
Now, what kind of things did unions do before that was the case, right? I've been having long conversations with V about this and learning a whole lot. Because did you know that unions would strike on behalf of other unions?
Yeah, sympathy strikes.
That was a thing. And not just not just like in similar, states or similar cities, but like if textile workers in France were feeling that they were getting paid too low, and they went on strike, then dock workers in Italy didn't show up the next day.
Yep.
It didn't even matter what country you were in. They would strike together, right? It's crazy looking at like the SAG-AFTRA strikes, because they really held out for everyone who was a member of SAG-AFTRA, but they were not able to look out for other people who were in the entertainment industry because they were part of other unions and they could not strike on behalf of other people.
Right.
Gloves are off, baby. Like,
yeah.
Not to mention, not to mention, but you've had to legally like submit, a notice, right, that you are going to strike. Give them time to work it out, right? If that's gone too, we could tomorrow, today, fucking walk out. Like,
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I think that people, so we don't learn much about the history of organizing, at least to my knowledge. Most people that I talk to do not know much about the history of organizing in this country. I think that's very intentional. I wasn't allowed to attend school, but what I was told was that the reason we have a 2-day weekend was because the founding fathers couldn't decide between giving people Sunday off for church or Saturday off for Sabbath. And so they decided to do both. That is just a goddamn lie. That is not how that happened at all. I was raised by very anti-union people.
how many people actually died for that?
No, I know.
Like,
I know. I know.
wow.
Yes. And it's just like, oh no, it was the founding fathers. They get credit for the 2-day weekend. Okay, cool. But yeah, I think that the National Labor Relations Board and the laws that we have around unionizing now, those were compromises to protect businesses and the government from the workers. Those were not compromises to protect the workers. And so, yeah, when you take those things away, when you're like, we're not doing any more, there's no more legal unions, then like striking can get real wild real fast, right? If you have a contract, you are not allowed to do a sympathy strike in this country, right? That's illegal. So like, I don't know, folks who are working at a car manufacturing plant cannot go on strike on behalf of, like we were talking about, Starbucks or Amazon under the laws, because it's like, well, you already have a contract in place. You cannot go on strike while your contract is in place. You have to wait until your contract is up to strike. And then there's certain within that, there's certain things that people have to so, you have to give notice that you're going to be striking depending on what industry you're in, all these different things, right? And yeah, if they get rid of that, then like a general strike is on the fucking table immediately.
It is.
Immediately.
So let's talk about what that is, because I did not know until well into adulthood really, what that was. And I know that we have a lot of international viewers, and I be patient, because I'm sure for you that's easy enough. Kristen in the live chat mentioned that she lives in Sweden, and there was a strike in 2008, and there were sympathy strikes in Sweden, in 2018. And that's fantastic.
Yeah.
We don't have that here. So what would a general strike be? What the hell is that?
So a general strike is basically when everyone, air quotes everyone, right? So you can get either a bunch of unions together to collectively go on strike all at once, functionally shutting down the economy or a huge chunk of the economy temporarily. And that's the thing that's one of the few things that actually gives me some hope, is that workers have all of the power. Actually, we don't know it. They've convinced us that's not true, but you could potentially shut down all of the transportation, right? You could potentially shut down all of the food manufacturing. You could there's different places, right, where it's like all of a sudden everybody can just walk away, be like, nope, you need to come to us, and say, like, we can say that to whoever we want to. And it is actually really cool to look at. If you read up on unions, it is actually really cool and inspiring to see how much power we do have when we withhold our labor.
Yeah.
But it's like everybody can collaborate on that. Everybody can choose to come together essentially and say, nope, we're just going to do this for everybody. They're not paying any of us fairly, so we can all just walk away. And like, can you imagine what would happen to, for example, the Dow Jones Industrial Average if nobody worked for just 2 weeks?
Oh, it would be the end of the world. I what's important right now is that we are setting up relationships within our communities to be able to support each other through those 2 weeks.
Yep.
That's what we
Yeah,
need.
and that's huge and essential. And I don't want to make light of that. That will take probably years of organizing. So I do want to be very cognizant of the amount of work that goes into something like a general strike to make sure that, you know, people still have something to take home to put on the table every night.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the cool thing about the way that unions are supposed to be organized now is that it's like you'll still get like whatever your contract is, you can get a contract where you still get a paycheck. That's what your dues go to, essentially, is you'll still get a paycheck while you're striking so that, you know, because you're whatever the bosses are like, oh, you're not working, we're not paying you. Okay, fair capitalism, whatever. I'll still be getting paid while I'm on strike as we're negotiating a contract. A general strike, you don't get that
Nope.
because there's there is no like
Because it's hostile.
governing body.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So you
And
do have to organize that part ahead
yeah.
of time.
And really that fear is what has prevented so much of this from happening. But if the rails are gone already, then we're not the ones who put anybody in this situation. We're the ones who have found ourselves in this situation. So we can do something and
Yeah.
should do something about it.
Yeah.
We have international callers who are wanting to talk about some of this stuff.
Okay.
So let's hop first over to the UK and talk to Tim. Tim, you're live on the show.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Doing
Hi, Tim.
okay, considering what the hell we're talking about. You want to talk about abortion issues?
No, well, I think you were talking about that at the time when because not gonna lie, it was a bit of a pity call if I'm honest, because I came on and you said like nobody was calling, so I thought screw it, I'll come and say hi.
Oh, thanks,
but
Tim.
yeah, I came in and you're talking about strikes, so I'm probably better with strikes to be fair than I am with abortion issues, but I'm happy to talk about either or anything else you want to talk about.
Tim, I sincerely appreciate it. I would love to get your take on things because in the United States, yeah, this is the situation that we have, right? There's not a protection of workers the way there is in Europe, and I'm assuming in the UK. Is what we're saying, does it even make sense in the context of where you live? Like, what does it feel like to hear about this kind of shit not being a part of the United States? Oh, Tim? Tim?
Oh,
It
it
looks
says
like
it's
Tim's having some
terminated
audio
call.
issue.
I don't know what
Oh,
happened.
shit. Something happened. That's all right. You know what? We will hold off and see if Tim will call back in.
Okay.
Yeah. That's weird. Actually, I think he's calling back in right now. Yeah. Here we go. Tim, you there?
Hi, sorry, what happened there?
No worries. So I was asking, how does this even like make sense contextually for someone who doesn't live in the United States?
Yeah, so I don't know. I kind of only saw like heard the first part of what you just said, but I didn't see the end part. But
No worries.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I guess I can look at it more. Sorry, go on.
No, I was saying living in the UK, there are probably, I'm assuming, more protections when it comes to workers. And in the United States, it's been absolutely insane, dismantled for years and years and years. So does it even contextually like hold up, or is it similar where you're at?
I don't know because obviously I don't live in the United States, so I don't really know what it's like for you guys. I know there are workers' rights. I'm sure there's workers' rights there as well. It's just a matter of how much and where, I guess. Though looking from a historical perspective, actually, here it used to be absolutely brutal. Before before kind of the Enlightenment back in the feudalist days, it was a lot more different. It was because basically it was the ruling classes and the peasants, and basically the ruling classes treated the peasants terribly. And there were a few cases where like the peasants would ride up. So the big one is something called the Peasant Rebellion of 12 something, I think it was. I can't remember the exact date. Led by a guy called Wat Tyler. You heard of that?
I have not heard of that.
No. So yeah, I think it was one of the kings. Basically, a guy called Wat Tyler. I can't remember what he did, but basically I think he was in Kent, which for those who don't know is about southeast of London. And basically he put together like almost like a small army. I think it was more of a spur of the moment thing, and he basically just marched on London at the time where the king was, and basically scared the shit out of all the aristocracy. And I think actually it was an interesting one because a lot of the guards kind of just let them in, because especially in places like the Tower of London where it is literally a castle. So it was fortified against it, but basically there was a bit of a showdown and it lasted all of 5 seconds. But I think it kind of scared the shit out of the aristocracy, and they kind of treated the peasants a bit better.
So honestly, I think that is a through line. And I really, really want to drive this point home for anybody who thinks that workers' rights have happened because we asked nicely for it. It has never been that way. No one has ever asked nicely for, treatment that way and gotten it. The reason that has the case, they scared the shit out of the aristocracy. They didn't show up to hand them a strongly worded letter, I'm sure. And no, and in the United States, the reason why there's a government body that oversees union activities and approves legal unions and legal, what is allowable legal union activity, is because they needed to try and take the edge off of just how damaging unions were to the wealthy.
Yeah, well, I think the thing is though, it's different nowadays in a post-industrial society, because back in the feudal days, if everything was done by peasants, the thing about peasants is they're very easy to replace. So the thing is though, back in those days, if somebody got upset, you could basically just go over and kill all the peasants and then get some more peasants to live off your land. And I think a big part of it is when sorry, go on.
No, that's okay. It just sounds like right to work states here in the U.S. Here in the United States, there are states that have legally said that you can be fired at any moment for any reason, even if it's for no reason at all, and you have zero repercussion, zero way to keep your job. They call it right to work because we live in a dystopian doublespeak society. But that is just the way it is. So if you don't like it, they will just replace you with any other number of poor, starving people who are dying to get some kind of job. So, no, so far you're still talking about now.
Yes. Well, the thing that I'll say differently is yes, there's will they replace you, but there's another thing of can they replace you. So when you get into an area where if the ruling classes, if they get the wealth from the people, that's where I think it was around the Industrial Revolution that striking tended to come about, because it had more power back in the days. I guess my point was, if you're easy to replace, then you don't really have much power with striking, because you can just stop working and they'll just get someone else to do it. But if you're the only ones that can do it, then you have a lot more power. And also, I think a big other thing as well is organization as well. I think a lot of it ties in with the invention of the printing press. So, I mean, peasants are much more easy to control when they don't talk to each other. But if they can all organize around a central figure, then it becomes a lot easier, because if you can spread communication and coordinate between yourselves, you can all work as a group. And I think there's a bit of game theory in here as well. It's not very effective. So go on.
No, I kind of want to push back just a little bit. People didn't walk out going, "I'm irreplaceable." No, at least my knowledge of this, and I want to be very clear here. I'm speaking historically. I'm not saying we ought to do anything, because that would be bad and get this show demonetized and this channel off the air. So let me be very clear that the tactics that they used wasn't just to walk out. They'd bomb the fucking factory, right? Like, they wouldn't just walk out and hope they were replaced. Like, when it came to Industrial Revolution, you didn't cross the picket line because it was morally a problem, but because you might not survive. Scabs got the shit beat out of them if they were lucky. Like, I think that everybody's just, it feels like we're still tied into this civility politic, when the fact is that we're losing everything that was fought very hard for with uncivil means.
Sure. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is it's more using the tools that hurt the people. I mean, I agree. It's not about asking nicely. It's about leverage, or if that's the right term. It's like, what leverage do you have on the people who are kind of controlling your wages or other things like that? What are the levers? What actual things can you do to hurt that person, or not to be hurt, but like influence them in a certain way. So if you're, say, the worker in a company, the CEO of that company, or the stockholders, or whatever, or the boards, they're making money through the work of the workers. So one thing the workers can do is they say, okay, we're going to stop working, then all of a sudden the flow of money stops, and they're the ones who get hurt. But the problem with that is it only works if all the workers strike together. And that's what I'm saying. I think there may be an element of game theory here. It's not very effective if one worker strikes, but they have to all strike together. So it's one of those things that you need to kind of reach a tipping point, or have some sort of organization so you all work as one, rather than kind of working individually. So it's more of it needs to be structured. It's not just an individual strike. And I think a lot of movements suffer from that problem. They don't really have any sort of structure or organization. And because they don't have any structure or organization, they're not as powerful as they could be.
Agreed.
I think that's really connected to a lot of the American like hyper individualism narrative that we get sold from the time we're before kindergarten, even, where it's like, no, we don't take care of other people. You look out for yourself. And, as long as you have your needs met, nobody else actually matters. And I think that it's really interesting because we're sold that as an empowering narrative, and it's actually incredibly disempowering for everyone who's not individually wealthy. And I think that's on purpose, that they give us that narrative of like, nope, you're in it for you, and you're in competition with everyone else. You have no friends, you have no allies, you have no support. Just do whatever you need to do to get ahead, and then we're all kind of left going, okay, what do I need to individually do in order to survive this system? And we don't think communally or collaboratively until things get really, really bad. And then you go, oh shit, like there are millions of other people who are in the exact same position I am, who are not being paid enough, who are being disrespected by, the bosses, or, whoever, the landowner, whoever the situation, whatever the situation is. I think that they're very much were sold this disempowering narrative as the only way to accumulate power. And I think that is on purpose. Yeah,
absolutely.
I think with the modern world, a bit of not a contradiction, but go back a couple hundred years, or since then, we've become more communal and less communal at the same time. And what I mean by that is, people were a couple hundred years ago were much more dependent on their communities. They all had to look out for each other. And since then, we've become much more about the individual. I agree. But the thing is, though, actually, we're all part of this big community that all seems to work together. And I think it's more the size of the communities rather than.
Yeah. Sorry, no. I think. I'm sorry. I'm just agreeing. No. It feels like we're bouncing the same thing back and forth a bit, though. Tim, I do want to tell you that we've got a good number of callers that have come in, and you have absolutely helped today. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I'm good to be a good take one for the team, so to speak. Be more the community minded.
Appreciate it, brother.
Hopefully we weren't that mean to you, Tim. Thank you so much.
Oh, you weren't that mean. No, thank you. No,
okay, good.
Anyway, have a good time. Take care, guys.
Bye.
Thanks.
Okay, we have the Basque region of Spain calling. We have Texas calling. We have someone in Canada who's still getting screened, so we can't take them yet. Who do you want to talk to first?
Yeah, let's do Basque. Let's do that.
Yeah.
I think they've been waiting the longest.
Hodai in Basque. Hey.
Hello, guys. Hello.
Long time no talk.
Long time no talk, indeed.
So
glad you remember.
Absolutely. I remember how excited you were that I told you that I knew where that was.
Indeed, yeah.
Do you have any room? Can we come your direction?
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, there is plenty of room.
I will absolutely hold my nose and drink some of that red wine Coca-Cola stuff.
Absolutely, Cali Mocho.
Oh, Jesus. It's so bad.
It's lovely. Come on.
I'll take the
cheese.
cheese.
A summer thing. Great.
Have you had that, Tori?
No.
No, mixed red wine and Coca-Cola.
Nope. No, thank you, please. I'm not.
It is delicious.
I'm a non-drinker.
Okay. So you want to talk about
So,
community organizing?
yes, both two things.
Yeah.
One is community organizing, and the other thing is talking. Seeing that the union conversation is also happening. There is another step, sort of slightly removed from unions, but also that kind of workplace organizing, which is cooperatives, right?
Hmm.
Which I don't think is talked about enough.
Okay.
And it's very representative of my region. We do the world's biggest cooperative is the Mondragon Group, which is like their main thing is like 15 minutes away from where I live.
Oh wow.
And I think it's not that it's an alternative to unions. You should still have unions, obviously, but it's an alternative to owner worker sort of structure in our day-to-day capitalist sort of society.
Okay.
That's great. I've seen like 2 companies organized that way in the US in like the last year. So we don't really use that model very often, but a couple of people are getting wind of it and trying to implement it here.
Can I get a little bit more info about that? So,
Oh,
what is that exactly?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. So, the idea is that every employee is also an owner of the company.
Oh, got it. Yeah. Okay.
So
Co-op.
you get yeah, it's a co-op. Yeah. So every employee gets their voice heard. Every employee gets a vote. Every employee gets you get to choose how much money the CEO makes. You get to choose how much money you make, and based on your earnings. There is a split earning incentive. So the more the company makes, the more you get paid. Which are things that for
Sure.
me are common sense.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I would say.
It's I think it's interesting that you have there's this communist philosophy of the workers owning the means of production, and if the workers are owning a piece of the company that they are a part of, then that does feel like this this communist philosophy put into action, and that is very successful in a capitalist world.
See, that's where I would disagree. I wouldn't call it communist.
Really, what would you call it?
No.
Marxist?
So, it's definitely more socialistic, 100%.
Really?
I don't know if I would use the term communist. So, for me, the term communist, like if we go to the roots of communism, is a stateless, moneyless society, which I don't think this applies to.
So that's anarchy, not communism.
Um,
Communism specifically relies on a state. There is a need for a state. It's just who's in charge, right? You don't have the bourgeoisie in charge. You have the proletariat rising up and taking their place, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, we would go to like a more like sort of maybe we call this more like libertarian socialist, like commune. What's the communalist? I think is the term, maybe.
Okay.
Something like that.
Okay.
It rings a bell, but I'm not like the most political person, but
No.
The word kind of forces me to be.
So I'm bringing this up because I'm wanting to leave a breadcrumb trail through these conversations, because
Absolutely.
we have a caller from the last time Tori was on who was talking about communism in confusing ways, and so I'm trying to pointing out very specifically using this language how these things are working together in this scenario. That you have a group of people who together own the company, and they all benefit when that company succeeds, and they get to do spending money on whatever they want with that. It's not like it's being spent for them. It's just that they get a more equal cut.
Mm-hmm.
My main thing is that this sort of company still participates in a market economy.
Yep.
So
Right.
there is still that sort of market economy sort of point of view, right? Where you're still competing against other companies, and there is no the state is not taking part on who owns the company. The state has no bearing over where the company goes. It's the workers in the company.
Yeah.
So you're competing in the free market essentially with the products that the company or services that the company is providing. That makes
Yes.
sense.
Yes. But so my sort of, because defining socialism is kind of difficult because there are so many different definitions of socialism.
I would say it's doubly true talking about anarchy. By the way, I'm sure
Yeah,
people.
no, that 100%, yes. But so for me, my personal sort of point of view of socialism is a society where every business is a co-op. Every employee is the owner of the means of production.
That would be amazing.
I would love
So,
this. Sign me up.
and every time I've had a conversation with someone that is like not only considers themselves right wing, but like it's actively right wing and like votes for right wing policies. And my point is, like, haven't you had absolutely terrible bosses that don't know what they're doing? Of course, like who hasn't? Oh, wouldn't you like to have the ability to, you and your 4 colleagues get to vote who your boss is? Wouldn't that be amazing? Well, yeah, that sounds great. That is basically this.
Yeah.
Isn't that complicated?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that I just in my experience, too many people think that workers are too stupid to do it. They need some smart CEO to come and do it for them because they can't depend on people to make wise decisions for themselves and their organization. I think that fighting that mentality is something we need to talk about, and we need to talk about often, and we need to talk about it everywhere we can. That the most.
See, I don't even entirely disagree with that notion.
Oh, here's
is
the funny
dumb.
thing. I lived in Austin, Texas, and I got to be plugged into the tech bro, space. Oh, trust me. So number one, they're all middle-aged white guys, and number two, every middle-aged white guy has a podcast, and I do podcast stuff. I was plugged in, and let me tell you, some of the most brain-dead, fucking entitled pieces of shit human beings have come out of that, and they have, without irony, without any sense of like seeing themselves in it, looked at me and said, plain faced, like word for word, CEOs are who are going to save the world.
Oh God!
So
my ears are screaming Ayn Rand, and I can't deal with it. It's just.
I've met them personally. And so it might feel like it's preaching to the choir. Oh, of course, people can be smart enough to decide together what they're going to do when it comes to owning that company and where they're going to go with the products that they're making. That might seem totally obvious to people who are watching, but that doesn't mean it's obvious to everybody, because it's definitely not obvious to the people I interacted with in Texas. So that's why I bring it up.
My point of view here is that the individual, regardless of the individual, is pretty fucking dumb. Like, we don't, just from our point of view, we lack perspective. It's because we are individual human beings. We only get a single point of view. As many points of view as you might be hearing from other people, you still filter them through your perception. It's still your point of view.
Sure.
So a company is only going to benefit everybody equally, quote unquote, equally. Obviously, the people within the company are going to benefit a little bit more. If the people within the company are the ones choosing, if the CEO is the only one that's choosing, only the CEO is going to be the one that benefits.
Yeah. Well,
or
the
owners.
I understand you're in Spain. I can tell you that here in the United States, it is extremely different. Because so if I bring up like the American motor industry, right? If I talk about, brands like Ford and Henry Ford, I'm sure you're familiar enough with all of that, right? So there were
the company store.
Yep. So there were 2 major auto manufacturers in what had happened. I think this was in the 50s. But there was, I forget who, it was Ford and Tori, do you know where I'm going with this or no?
Oh, the other major auto manufacturer?
Yeah.
Who was I don't know who was competing with Ford, the big competition with Ford in the 50s.
No worries. So they actually purchased a stake in Ford, even though they were competing with each other. And as and as
I don't know this story.
As stakeholders, they got really upset when there were decisions made at the top that cost them potential revenue. And so they sued Ford as stakeholders and won. In the United States, it is legal precedent that if a CEO does not put profit before everything and does not put investor interest before everything else, they can get sued. So
what in the dystopia are you talking about?
yeah, so this was 70 years ago. It actually became legal precedent in the United States that you can get in trouble. You can get sued if you don't put company profits over everything else. Does that help contextualize why it's so different?
Yes, but at the same time,
GE,
co-op still works.
General Electric.
Oh yeah, General Electric. Yeah, there you go. The idea of a co-op still works because now there is no like
or GM,
nameless
General Motors.
person.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I mean General Motors makes more sense. GE didn't. I don't think would be a direct competitor of Ford.
No, go ahead.
The idea of a co-op still works because now it's not a faceless somebody that owns whatever percent of the company. If you want to own a percent of the company, you need to be employed by the company. Done.
Mm-hmm. That changes the dynamic so much because here it is really the shareholders who get to decide where all of the profit goes. And of course they decide it goes to them. And then they, as Eric said, can sue the CEO. So this is, I'm quite sure Ford's not the only company where the CEO or like the kind of top brass of a company have been sued for wanting to improve their employees' lives and using some of the profits to reduce turnover, for example, so that they can keep people for longer, keep employees for longer because turnover costs a lot of money. But yeah, the incentive really is that like the shareholders have a right to any and all profits functionally.
Yeah.
And there's like legal consequences if companies do not do everything in their power to maximize what the shareholders get.
And you're absolutely right. It's definitely not the only time. It was just kind of the opening of the floodgates. That was kind of a landmark case that really kind of set a really terrible precedent.
And obviously, it was two multi-billion-dollar companies doing the fighting. Because why would it?
Well, and different? I feel like this kind of gets to a 101 level that I really want to push on this show for people who are really just starting to interact with these ideas. And that is, hold on. Did I lose it entirely? Wait. It'll come back. I lost it. Go on. I apologize.
Oh no!
Do you know how embarrassing that is on live air? That is horrible.
Oh God!
Listen, we've all had COVID. It's fine. There's zero judgment here.
I've done music live. I've forgotten lyrics. It's painful. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's rough.
When it's your own songs, it doesn't matter.
Oh, got it. Okay. So we're talking about specifics, and I want to point out the broader context here. And that is that this is capitalism. This isn't just bad shit in the United States. You know, this is what happens when capitalism gets to do what capitalism does. And it's not even CEOs. We get angry at CEOs, but we have to recognize that it is the system that was put in place that has made it so that CEOs are now liable to be sued if they don't follow those rules, because that is the rule. That is the system in place. The CEO of United Healthcare that got shot in the street was on his way to what? A board meeting, meeting with investors. Do you think they didn't continue the meeting?
Oh, of course.
Right.
Like, This is the system. And so when we're talking about issues with capitalism, I'm talking about what we currently have and what it's built up to. So like, I just want to be clear at the 101 level for people, this is not, these are not aberrations. This is the system working as
This
intended.
is the norm, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is our baseline.
And this is why it is systemic. This is why it is capitalism and not United Healthcare, not Ford, not General Motors or General Electric. And why it's not just, Amazon or Tesla or whatever the case is. It is the system of capitalism that is being that is being propped up legally and encouraged, that you are supposed to be this evil. That is the point. So,
In other words, capitalism works when you're on the top.
everything works when you're on the top.
Exactly. It's designed to work that way.
Yeah. Hodai, thank you for calling in. Tori, was there anything else you wanted to talk to Hodai about?
No, this is great. This is a wonderful conversation. Thanks, Soda. I really appreciate you calling in and waiting.
Thank you, guys. Just to bring the point home, please, guys, unionize more. Think about unions. Think about
we're trying to encourage people.
Better?
Agreed.
Absolutely. And that's what we're
just
what
to
we're
give
fighting
you an
for.
update as well. Remember last time we had a conversation that I wasn't talking to my dad because he had raised his hand.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm still not talking to my dad because he still hasn't apologized.
Good. Actions have consequences.
Yeah, I mean, relationship with my mom is fixed and everything is fine, but
my
dad refused to apologize. Done.
I am proud to report that I have not talked to my dad since then either, or for the last 15 years. Anyway, Hodai, take care of yourself.
Would you be open to talk if they apologize and behave like decent human beings?
No.
Still no. Okay.
No.
Because you don't see still anything changing.
Well, no, because there are things that people do that can't always be taken back.
Yeah.
I agree. You can be in a relationship with somebody who is a drug addict, an alcoholic, an abuser, and they could be a really bad person to you, and then they can get their shit together. That doesn't mean that you want to have a relationship with them again. Because when you see them, you see the abuse, you see them strung out. Whether they are ever going to be or not again, right? The damage is done. So that's just what happens when you fuck up hard enough. But that's just me. Hodai, thank you.
I am trying for the sake of my mom because I don't want her to be sad.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for your time. And
thank you.
Left fist raised in the air. Let's go.
Take care.
See you guys.
So people in the chat were asking, who is this co-host that Eric has on? Hey, everybody.
Oh, hello. I'm Tori.
This is Tori Williams Douglas. Tori Williams Douglas is a amazing, not just a Twitter personality, but also the host of White Homework, also the host of Go Home Bible You're Drunk, and the once a month host of Skeptic Generation. This was
first Sunday of the month. It's my spot. I claimed it. Eric asked me first what Sunday I wanted, and I said the first Sunday for some reason. I don't know why reasons.
I love it.
So yeah.
Hello. I also just love that, like, it's my damn show. I can have my friends on if I want, and I get to actually spend time with my friend. It's a great way to start the month. Even if we're opining all the terrible things that are happening in the world, the fact that I get to hang out with you
good.
Makes things a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very here for it. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I have 2 podcasts, and I do anti-racism and like liberation, queer inclusion, education. So yeah, that's who I am. I'm just was formerly a big nerd on Twitter, kind of drawing connections between U.S. history, nervous system responses, and racism. And maybe someday we will get into how all of those things collide in everybody's brains. But I've been doing this for a little while, and I was working in a neuroscience lab before doing this work full time for myself. And I'm really glad to be on here. This is like, I think about this literally all month. I can
Yeah!
say for the 1 month that I've been on, I think about it all month long. So
Good. I'm so glad. We do have other callers,
Yeah.
and so I don't want people to
Sweet.
think we're ending. I just want to make sure that, like, until people know who you are, I think I need to figure out to get like some name tags. That way you are more prominently, displayed, because people know who I am, which is why I don't mind not having name tags up.
Yeah.
But people need to get to know who you are too. So
Yeah,
I don't mind like
absolutely.
taking a break to let people know who you are as many times as is necessary. All right. So you can see the call-in studio. Who are we taking next?
Let's see who's been let's talk to Connor. I want to talk about general strike stuff, because this is something that I could learn more about myself, and I want to start organizing with people. I've actually been talking about a general strike for several years, actually, on Twitter.
Love it. All right.
So,
Then we've
yeah.
got Connor in Texas.
Hey guys.
Hey.
Hi.
So in regards to general strike, I just want to say, let's fucking go.
Agreed. Yes. I'm ready. Sign me up.
I have been waiting for something like this for so long, years. I really love when the French do theirs too, like the most recent one, where they had it so massive. The garbage guys were leaving it all, and they weren't picking up anything, so that everyone had to deal with that. And like the municipal utility workers were shutting off the water for the specific politicians that were going to raise the retirement age on them, but they gave water for free and cleared the accounts for poor people.
And
dude, the French go so hard on their strikes. It's inspirational. It's inspirational.
Was that the one the most recent one?
That was the most recent one.
Yeah, that they barricaded their elected officials into the building, didn't they? Like they literally barricaded the building so that they wouldn't get out.
They have tactics. The French have really turned turned striking into an art form, and they really know how to make their politicians afraid. And I wish we had something. I wish our politicians were afraid of us. That'd be amazing.
They were at one point.
At one point,
I was also gonna bring up that Michael Moore quote. In America, the people fear the politicians. In France, the politicians fear the people.
Yep.
That feels so true, because I can't imagine turning off the electricity at like I don't know, someone, just anyone's house. Like that would be, you'd go to prison.
Well,
if you shut down the electricity or the water to Mar-a-Lago, like you would spend time in a federal prison.
Well, yeah, but maybe if we can figure out how to get the municipal workers to do it like the French did and get away with it.
Well, so here's the thing. Getting away with it is not what was on the minds of the people who got us the rights that we have in the first place. And it is not. It was not on the minds of the people who set up a system that was flawed in many ways, but was that is currently being dismantled, right? Like the reason you got to
be able to get away with it to make it effective.
Well, I think, Eric, are you talking about like the consequences, like being willing to face the consequences of doing the thing versus being able to escape maybe and not face consequences? I think that there is definitely, some conversations we have to have about, doing the thing, facing the consequences if you get caught, and where and when that's worth it, because it is kind of different. Everybody's got to do their own sort of risk analysis. But Connor, I think we're on the same page for the most part. I think Eric maybe is just thinking about, hey, a lot of people who were organizing did go to prison. Some of them were executed, because we do that in this very backwards country. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't show up and do the right thing and like make the points that need to be made on behalf of the people.
There's always going to be those Pinkertons called in.
So, the funny story. Did I mention this last time?
Funny story after a comment about Pinkertons?
Yeah.
My exact question. Yes. Go on. Tell us.
Sure. So, there was a point in time I had my guard card. I think I still do, technically. and looking for work around Portland when I first moved out here. The Pinkertons were hiring
Oh.
in Portland.
Oh, I
They're
didn't
still
know
around?
that.
So they're still around. Tori, they're here.
I didn't know. I had no idea. You did not tell me this.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that. I remember that.
I told V, I said, V, what if I became a Pinkerton? V said, there are a lot of things that I would put up with, but I would leave you immediately and there would be no discussion. I was like, fair. That's
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for people who are, because we do have somebody who just called in from Spain and somebody who just called in from the UK, they probably don't know what a Pinkerton is.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
So maybe we can put that into a little bit of context. Connor or Tori.
Essentially, mercenaries who are hired by big businesses they originally started as Civil War veterans. They were called in to break up strikes, and the most famous one they were a part of back in the day ended up killing 9 striking workers.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a militia functionally, right? I mean, that's how it functioned. I think technically today they wouldn't be considered a militia the way that like Blackwater, like Eric Prince's stuff, right? But they just be considered like private security, which is we have hundreds or thousands of those companies in the US. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, when they were kind of originally put together, it was to break strikes. Strikers, workers had very few rights in the United States at this time. And yeah, they used violence. They killed striking workers. Basically, we'll get into standoffs, like shooting standoffs, not just like, oh, we're going to stand here and like mean mug each other. Like people were actually murdered, because yeah, these people were brought in alongside cops to break strikes. And so that's kind of the very abbreviated history of the Pinkertons here in the United States. To my knowledge, they're not assassinating people anymore, but I don't companies in this country, you never know. I'm not going to give anybody credit that I don't think they deserve. So, but that's their legacy at the very least. Even though I think now they probably function more as like a private security company. Did they pay well, Eric? Do you remember what they were?
I don't remember.
I bet they didn't.
So I feel like to sell out your fellow workers, and not only that, but break their ability to speak out for themselves, I hope they would pay well. Jeez.
This is really interesting though, right? Because that goes back to the idea that the cops aren't workers.
So that is this month when I mentioned that there were some key pieces, right? I believe there was like there's a board that makes decisions about what is legally recognized as a union in the United States, and one of the necessary board members was removed this month by Trump, making decisions impossible, at least for now. That's the way that I understand this has happened, right? I believe that there is a carved out exception for police unions when it comes to breaking up, what is legally, acceptable for unions in the United States. They are workers, and they also are exactly who is selling out everyone else. I feel like, the police, they are class traders because they are in that class. They are workers.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Just because they're class traders doesn't mean that they're not part of the class. That just means that
and I think that like going back to the idea of Pinkertons, like there's enough cops now that they don't have to call the Pinkertons in. They just use the cops to break strikes, you know.
Well, and
It's like,
and the Pinkertons. So anyway,
and yeah, both. Okay, you have multiple tools to accomplish the same
here in
goal.
Portland, we need to learn. We need to. Yeah, we're going to continue that conversation. All right. Was there anything else that we wanted to talk about in this specifically?
I just wanted to make a couple of comments about what the guy from Spain says. Like, Mondragon has been my fantasy of how an economy should work for years now. He undersold it. That is the world's largest worker co-op. It has 2,000 different businesses across all different sectors. They easily, whenever one is having issues, they can easily just retrain workers at a different business in the co-op. And I looked it up. Worker collectives and co-ops fall under the category of being distributism or laborist instead of capitalist.
Okay.
Interesting.
I'm gonna have to look that up. I'm not aware of those terms.
Yeah.
And in regards to having a general strike down here in Texas, you get the guys who run the who control the electricity, or at least the workers that can do it, to shut off the electricity to the state capitol building when they're in session, when it is hot out. Give it a few days and those politicians will start to crack from the intense heat they will be having to deal with, because that building was not originally designed with AC in it.
I think that of all of the things that make me nervous and afraid and frustrated over the last month, I am deeply excited at the prospect of us getting to do those kinds of things. Yeah, I don't know if what I said made sense, but
no, I think it does.
Yeah.
I think it does. Yeah.
Connor, I really appreciate the extra context and just you calling.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
Oh yeah, I love these kinds of conversations.
I can tell you're good at them.
Well, I hope you can organize all your fellow Texans. Honestly, like this is great. Even though Eric is here now, but otherwise, I think he probably would have been down there with you trying to organize to shut off the power to the Capitol building.
The best version of me would. Connor, take care of yourself.
See ya.
Okay, so we have talked about this next caller a good bit. And I know that I'm going to try a different tack on today's call. I want to try and explore a little bit more. And so I want to do my best and talk to John in Canada. John, you're live on the show.
Hi, John. How are you? Sorry.
Good.
Sorry, how are you?
Good, as always. I have to commend that not everybody calls back after as aggressive as things got last time. And so I'm interested. You want to talk about and continue a discussion about socialism and capitalism, right?
Well, before we start that, I just want to say two things. A, I'd like to apologize for my behavior the last time we spoke.
Did John do something to apologize? I don't think you were...
John, I think you were okay.
Yeah.
Is there something that stood out to you that felt like you wanted to apologize for?
Oh, I was under the impression that you were mad at me.
No. So, John, it's not you, the person, John. It's the ideas, and we get really excited about and really emotionally charged when it comes to these ideas, because ideas should be jumped in and wrestled with and attacked and all of that. But you as a person, you're good.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, perfect. I'm glad to know that.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So
okay, I thought to say, yeah, go ahead.
So I felt like rewatching your last call that we were talking past each other quite a bit. We weren't having the same conversation, and I don't want to do that again this time. So instead, I want to see where you are, right? It sounds like you have different definitions of socialism and communism and capitalism than we do. And because of that, I never got to interact in that place. And so can we start there? Can we start, or is there something else that you wanted to jump into?
Okay, I want to let you know something. I'm not an expert on these things. I'm relatively new, so I'm generally looking for an education. And I think the three of us can agree that we all want to live in a better society. Can we agree on that?
Yeah. It's
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
definitely not the world that I want to be living in right now.
Okay. So, what I really want to know is that under a socialist model, would it really be better? Because, like I said, I really don't know.
I mean, I think that's a great question, right? And I think that it's okay to ask those kinds of questions. I guess it depends on how you're counting better, though, right? So just for me, just as an example, John, like what I typically look at, I can look at a policy through the lens of like a socialist policy, for example. I can look at that through the lens of myself as an individual and my family and, who benefits. But I also personally want to look at the data. I want to talk to other people about their experiences. I want to talk to you about your experience, right? Like, if just as an example, this isn't socialism, but the US and Canada are for some reason getting into, for some reason, the reason being the US and President Trump, we're getting into a trade war that's going to hurt both of us, right? Like, so I want to look at the benefits of a policy, not just to me, my family, my community, right? But also I want to look at the data and see like, okay, is this something that's going to benefit everybody? And I think that, socialism, socialized medicine, for example, right? That we can look at the data and see that like what the US is doing isn't working great for a lot of people. We spend way more money and have worse outcomes. So does that make sense, John? I mean, do you agree that like we can sit down and kind of weigh the pros and cons for ourselves, for our families, for our friends, and also on a broader scale kind of compare?
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, but down in the United States, is like healthcare is not socialized, or it's free. You have to pay health insurance, right? Which is expensive.
Yes, that's correct. I would say like a family of 4 probably pays $1,000-1,200 USD in a lot of states.
Yeah, my mother was diagnosed with cancer and has been going through chemo. She's halfway through her chemo, and I think she's told me she spent about $15,000 so far
of her own money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And that's with
right.
that's with insurance.
That's with
insurance is also paying some, and Eric's mom is still having to pay this massive tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, she's only halfway through.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear that, Eric.
They caught it early, so that's why I'm not too upset. And it sounds like they're jumping on it, but just to give some context.
Yeah.
Okay. But so I'm assuming that's the reason why. Cause I know for a fact that lots of Americans, you come up here to Canada for medicine because it's cheaper.
Well,
right.
and sometimes it's just because it's the only place that's available at all. Yeah.
Sure.
But we can also agree that the medicine that you have is 10 times better than we have up here. The best that best than anywhere else in the world.
Depends. I think it depends. It's a spectrum, right? That like you can, if you have money, you can get some of the best, not everything, right? But you can get some of the best medicine in the world here. Yeah. But most, 95% of people don't have the ability to access that. So
yeah, if 95% don't have access to it, I don't know if you could say that we have the best medicine in the world. Like rich people do, but rich people don't live in the same
rich
America.
People have the best medicine. Sure.
Yeah.
I think we could all agree that rich people in the US probably have some of the best medicine.
Yeah.
I think that's fine.
And if that's the case, then
have you seen the movie Asylum with Matt Damon? It's set in the future where the rich people are getting good medicine on a space station, and all the poor people on Earth are getting shitty health care. Is it?
It's like, yes, that's how it is in the United States.
It is like
the
that.
wealthy people here don't go to space.
Yeah. Well, they do. Actually.
Oh, I meant for medicine.
That's true. That's true.
They go to space.
Yeah.
For fun.
Unless you're Elon Musk, you can't go to space.
Right. So, if that's the case, then, like, I want to be charitable and grant you what you're saying, that there's really good medicine here. It's just not here for most Americans, so it definitely doesn't feel like that.
It's not accessible, so it doesn't feel like it counts.
Yeah,
most people.
It's just rich people.
Okay, so how would you propose you solve that problem?
Well, should rich people be the only people who are healthy? Like, here's a better. I believe in the idea of basic human rights. That there are some things that are basic for people that I think they should have a right to. I don't want to, like, give that open-ended, though. Like, would you agree that people should be able to live with access to clean drinking water?
Yes, I do.
Sure. Or how about starvation? Should people be able to access food?
Well, that depends. Like I said before, there will always be rich people and poor people. There will always be people that can have more money they know what to do with, and there will always be people who are starving.
Well, but hold on.
That's never gonna change.
I want to challenge that, because I don't think that they're, like,
if there's enough food for everyone, this is kind of my question, right? Is like, if there's enough for everyone, is it fair that, like, the wealthy get to, for example, consume so much that there isn't anything left for the people at the bottom? Like, that doesn't seem fair to me personally.
Okay, here's the scenario. If let's say you have two people, one person has something, another person doesn't have something. If you keep taking from the person who does have something to give it to the person who doesn't have something, eventually, the person who has something in the first place, he'll have nothing too, and then you'll have two people who have nothing.
So,
and that's the fear I have of socialism. That if you keep taking from the rich, eventually they'll become poor, and you'll have two poor people. Like, socialism means equality, but equality doesn't mean two rich people. You can also have two poor people.
Yeah, John, I think what's happening here is I think you're skipping past the first steps and you're getting to this kind of end scary scenario, right? Well, I'm not talking about continually taking from other people. I'm just talking about a basic human right and starting at the very beginning, because the scenario you just described is tyranny, and I don't want that either. Right? We could talk about communism and really awesome like versions of communism. And you can talk about truly horrible versions of communism. And you pointed those out the last time you called in, right? Not all of them are that either, right? That there are good versions and bad versions, or better, incarnations of them. So, like, I think that we can walk away from this at the end of this call. John, I think that you would probably wind up agreeing with us that a version of socialism, not all-encompassing, take from everyone, give to everyone, but just trying to help secure the basic human rights to live and drink fresh water, should be something we should all go for.
I agree with that. I have no argument.
Okay, so would you agree that it's not socialism, it's the degree of it, right? That you're worried about things getting too far in that direction, but not that there's a problem with it in general, or just the idea of it?
Well, like I said at the beginning of the call, we can all agree that we want to live in a just, good society that everyone benefits.
John, I feel like getting hung up on the particulars last week painted you in a really uncharitable light. And so I want you to say that again, because I want everyone listening to hear you say that. I want people to know that you care about that. Say that again. What does everyone deserve?
We all deserve to live in a society where everyone is fair, equitable, and everyone is okay. A better society.
Yeah. It doesn't mean that everyone
Yeah.
is successful. It doesn't mean that everyone is
Well,
rich or whatever. But
no one's going to be successful in everything they do. That's impossible.
True. So I think we have a shared starting point now. What do you think?
I think so too.
What do you think, Tori?
I think this is great. I think this is awesome.
Cool. Okay. We actually got there, everybody. Today, February 2nd, 2025. It happened on this show. Sorry. John has a reputation for calling into other shows and not having as successful of a time. Would you agree?
No, but
with me?
John, I appreciate you saying that. I think that's really important. And if you don't mind, I would really like to go back to this idea of there is, I think that, yeah, it's like you can do like a hard right or a hard left and wind up in really bad places. And I want to agree that I think historically that's true. But also I think that something like with food, like you were talking about, you say, if you have two people, one of them is providing all of the food, another is eating all of the food, then eventually you're going to have two people with no food. Okay, maybe that's true. But I also think about like families, right? My kids, I am providing all of the food and they are eating all of the food and we're still making it, barely, but we're making it. I think that, something like that, right, with my kids, I can sit down and go like, hey, here's how you plant food, right? Here's how we grow some food so that there's more for everybody. I think that, yes, with some things, maybe there's only a limited amount, but I think the US, for example, being the wealthiest nation in the world, there's something in the top something right now. There's enough food for everybody, and we have the ability to continue growing more food. Right. So maybe somebody can't.
I'm sure farmers in the United States would have an opinion about that, but because I'm not a farmer, I'm pretty sure you're not a farmer, so we can't be 1% certain about that.
Depending on what it is, I did grow up in a really agricultural community, so I do have some insight, but I don't want to derail the conversation.
Neither do I.
You're doing great. Okay, so we agree that socialism is a philosophy, not one, at one, unchanging edifice, and that the philosophy of socialism isn't bad. We can disagree on the degree of it, but we understand that. Now let's talk about capitalism. What do you understand? What do you understand as capitalism?
Okay, so like I said before, I'm new to this, but what I understand about capitalism is, unlike communism, it's private actors, private owners, and it's for profit. So I guess the best way to describe it, as far as I know, is that in communism, it's the government or the people that share the means of production and the product of that production, and they share the profits. While in capitalism, it's one individual, one company, or a board of directors who, let's say they start an enterprise, and they own the means of production, and the money that's made from that, they get it, and it's shared among the shareholders. While the average workers, the people who work for that company, they get paid, but they're not getting the real profits. I guess an example would be, capitalism would be companies like Gillette, Ford, or Elon Musk companies. Yeah. While communism would be like the government, or if you want to use space as an example, communism could be an example like NASA, because NASA is a government agency funded by taxpayers, while the company that Elon Musk runs is private. It's him, and he's spending money, and I'm 100% certain he's guaranteed his own seat on the space shuttle. Am I correct?
Probably. But the larger thing you just described is so much more structured. like I can disagree with you on things, but it's only because you did really well in laying that out. So, Tori, do you want to take first crack at John and capitalism, or no? Or what are you feeling?
I want to hear what you have to say because I have some thoughts.
Sure.
But
So
yeah, Eric, you go.
yeah, absolutely. So I also did some discussions and some research since our last conversation last month, John. And capital, right? Just like having money can exist without capitalism. Capitalism, the way that you described it, you're right, it is a structure. And I think that it is built in an unfair way. And so are there some types of capitalism? Sure, that are benign. I think so. But when you talk about capitalism, I want to give you my version of it, because have you heard of an author named Ayn Rand?
I've heard the name, but I've never read her. I can't say it. No, I'll say no. I've never read Ayn Rand.
So Ayn Rand had a philosophy of capitalism that was completely untethered by restriction, that people did whatever they wanted without any legal repercussion. And to her, it created a utopia, a perfect world.
So in her book, capitalism led to utopia.
Well, wasn't it just for some people? If we're thinking about, are we talking about Atlas Shrugged?
I think so, yeah.
The utopia was, my understanding, I haven't read the whole thing because it's too long. My understanding was that the utopia really was just for like the owners of companies. They all bailed on society and were like, we're going to do our own little utopia here, which is really interesting because there have been wealthy people who have tried to copy this model, right? The Galt's Gulch model. And so there's a couple of Galt's Gulches around the world, and they don't work out the way that it does in the book at all, right? They tend to fall apart rather quickly. So I think that, I think Rand does present this utopian model of capitalism, but it is
not utopia for everyone.
It's not utopia for everyone, and it's still fiction.
So when you talk about capitalism, I'm not necessarily thinking about the most charitable version of capitalism. I'm thinking about the most destructive, unchecked, insane version of it. In the same way that when we brought up communism, you thought of the most unchecked, insane version of communism, and that's.
So in other words, we're both talking about the extreme.
Exactly, and we were talking past each other and not with each other.
Okay, are we doing better now?
I think we're doing way better.
I think we're doing great.
Yeah. So okay, so it feels like now we're standing on solid ground.
Yes.
Where do we go from here?
Okay. Well, as before I answer that question, I just want to ask one last question. One question: Was Ayn Rand an atheist?
I think so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, she is a very strong atheist. Yes.
Okay. So anyway, where do we go from here? Okay. Like I said, I'm not an economics major, but my best guess is that the best thing I can say is that socialism and capitalism. I can't say that one is better than the other. I think that both have their virtues, both have their flaws. I guess you have to keep both of them in check while you go, and you have to adjust to the times.
That seems fair. I think I could get with that.
Yeah, I think I agree, John.
Perfect. I'm glad we do.
We're making so much progress.
I was not expecting to get here this quickly already. I thought this would take 10 calls. John,
okay,
you've very clearly been thinking about this in the last month since our last call.
I have, yeah.
So,
I think we should leave it here. So,
yeah, do we disagree anymore?
Well, we can still talk about the nature of God, but we're not going to talk about that right now. But I think I'll leave you now. But I just want to say one more thing to your. Have a good day, Eric. And I want to say one thing to your partner. I love the hairstyle.
My co-host Tori.
Yes. Oh yeah, your co-host.
Thank
That's
you.
what I'm talking about. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Yeah,
I really
you.
appreciate that. I would, if you don't have to do this, I would love it if in a month you want to come back and talk about how our trade war is going. Because like, I don't think that the U.S. should be treating Canada like an enemy with our tariffs. And I think that's incredibly cruel and unfair, and it's going to drive up costs for you, and I think it's going to drive up costs for us. So if you experience that and you think about it and you want to call back next month, I would love to talk to you some more about that. I really appreciate you calling. I'm pleasantly surprised at how great this call went, John, and so it's nice to talk to you again. Thank you so much for calling back.
You're welcome. Have a good day, Eric, and have a good day.
Thank you. Thanks.
Were you ready for that?
No, I was not. That was lovely, actually. That was wonderful.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know what happened. This was great. I'm here for it. Baby steps. Let's do this.
Well, so here's the thing. Whenever John calls, I get a bunch of messages from fans who are just like, "Oh my God, John is so annoying. John calls into other shows, and it's always bad, and it's always bad."
Oh.
Was it bad? I don't think so.
No.
I good on John for thinking about it and doing some reading and really like working through it. I'm really impressed.
Yeah. I agree.
Huh.
I agree. That was great. It was a good conversation. Made some progress. Very respectful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those good.
So with that like baseline, I feel like from there, John could get to a point where he can argue things and potentially change our minds, you know. But you got to have that baseline.
Maybe so.
You know.
Sure. Right.
If you don't have a shared understanding, then all you're going to do is talk past each other. So we have
Absolutely.
a caller from India. Let's talk to Nachiket in India. You're live on the show.
Hi, Eric. Hi, Tori.
Hello.
It's been a great show so far.
Oh, thank you. What did you want to talk about?
Yeah, so, since the whole topic is about leftism and stuff, and I have a question more than like anything to like add, maybe.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I was wondering about what like the practical scope for internationalism is in the world as it is today. And I had like a few we can talk about how like there's rich countries and poor countries, for example, but even generally, like how do even people like how can people cooperate across passports, you know?
That's so broad, I don't know where to start.
Yeah, it is broad. Yeah, sorry.
Go for it. Take it.
Well, I mean, okay, so this is one of the things that I think is really important, and something that I think, and something I would talk about a lot in my own work, is that we have to have some creative imagination, right? And I think that, something that I observed in the last couple of weeks, I guess, month, right, was that when there was that window where TikTok was shut down and everybody jumped onto the Chinese app Red Note, and Americans
may I just say something about that just like quickly, because it was a point, because I'm calling from India and they banned TikTok here 5 years ago, and it has felt like it is like one opportunity got cut off ever since that happened. I just wanted to mention that because people, TikTok has been banned in India for 5 years.
Okay. Yeah. That's wow. I didn't realize that. So Americans were kind of dealing with that for a little bit, and we jumped onto a Chinese app called Red Note or Red Book. And Americans all of a sudden had this moment of realization that everything we'd been told about Chinese people was all anti-communist propaganda. It wasn't rooted in reality. And so it was really interesting to observe a lot of Americans interacting with Chinese folks for the first time and going, wow, you don't hate us. I've been told my whole life that Chinese people hate Americans, and talking to you, your lives are very similar to ours. And people were really kind of shocked and blown away and excited by this realization. And I think that just using that as an example, right, of Americans specifically are given a lot of really kind of anti the rest of the world narratives that we have to contend with, right? And so having like truly international causes of, you know, freedom and liberation, I think this is somewhere where we really do need to lay some groundwork, at least in the US, for shared humanity. Because we're kind of, again, we're given so much propaganda as education, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
And so we have these sort of, in our heads, they're not real relationships, right? But in our heads, we believe we have these really antagonistic relationships with people in other countries. And it is really interesting to observe Americans come to this realization of, oh, we have more in common with other workers in China and India than we have with the wealthy class here in the United States. And so I think for us, I think different countries probably have some different things that we need to work on. But for us, I think that it really does take that realization of, oh, we as the working class, I guess you could say, we have more in common with one another than we do with the billionaires. And so I think has to be like the jumping off point here in the US. I don't want to presume that there's that other people in other countries necessarily have that same work to do. But I do think that, you know, seeing India especially as kind of like this rising power, right? That it still is, the power is going to a very select few people, and that we as
exactly.
normal folks can work together and come up with ideas that benefit all of us. What that looks like will be interesting, right? And that's why I think we have to have the creative imagination. But I think that this is really essential for having that the more like internationalist lens.
Yeah, and I'm also just looking for, because you've worked in this space, Tori. I'm like, are there practical tools that people should know about? Maybe like.
I'm sorry. What was that? What should people know about?
Yeah, like I mean, no, like because like some like. I'm sorry. Was anyone talking?
Oh, no, there's a bit of a delay. I was just trying to help. I apologize.
Yeah.
It sounded like you were asking Tori if Tori had resources or practical tools that can help, you know.
Yeah. And like one thing I really found, like as one example that was really heartening, was even in France when they had the Yellow Vest movement, they also mentioned the fact that France also controls the currencies of many countries in Africa. And they were like citing that as an example of modern imperialism. And that was a good example of like workers in one country showing like really good solidarity with workers in another country. And like, I was just thinking of that example and the fact that, say, you know, like how a lot of international interactions happen on social media, and the social media is controlled by people like Musk. So what do you do about that? You know?
I know, I entirely agree. And what a weird deconstruction I have gone through when it comes to that. And I'm not on the other end of it, so I have no idea where to go with it. But yeah, no, like social media being pitched as the thing that is going to save the world, that, you know, everybody, you know, look at the Arab Spring, it's because of Twitter. Hey, Twitter, right? Social media apps are what's going to allow us all to communicate with each other and be able to get through these dystopian environments. And just slowly but surely, the governments have just been like picking up and collecting, you know, social media in a way that is just terrifying.
I only have questions. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I don't have
Oh,
answers
you don't
as
have
well.
answers. I'm not expecting you to. But yeah, no. How do we continue to support each other, and how can we continue to provide solidarity to each other across countries, across borders, across the world, when we can't trust the social media that we're using to engage with each other? Because it's the only way that we really connected and engaged in the first place in a meaningful way from, like this. So how do we do that? That is a general question that I have no idea what the answer to is, but I definitely am at a point where I worry that, I put way too much in the whole Twitter was instrumental in this or that, communication revolution, whatever. Like, Elon Musk owns Twitter now. Let's not pretend that that's going to happen again. I don't know. What do you think, Tori? What kind of what kind of resources should we be looking towards?
Well, I think that build it. There's two things that come to mind for me. Again, I keep coming back to this. Over the last couple of weeks, Eric, you and I were talking a little bit about this before we started recording, but the community building aspect of, building relationships to the extent that we can is really important. And also, I would say reading or, educating ourselves in other ways, to again, make those kinds of connections. Those are the two things that come to mind for me. I will say growing up in church environments, and, again, not being allowed to attend school for religious reasons, it was always really interesting to me. People would come to our church from other countries and they would talk about their experiences, or they'd come and sing and play music for us, or whatever the situation was. And I always wanted to go and I always made sure to go and have conversations with folks who came to our church from other countries, because I was really curious about the rest of the world. And I was able to create relationships with folks who lived in other places or had immigrated to the United States. And those relationships actually really helped me sort of inform some of my own as an individual, solidarity with folks in other countries, right? I had this very awkward, I shouldn't even be saying this. It was very strange. I was in Nashville many years ago, 2008, 2009. And I walked up to this young man at the coffee shop that I saw. And I was like, "Are you from Sudan by any chance?" And he was like, "Yeah, I am." And we connected and started having a conversation. We became friends on Facebook. He'd immigrated to the United States from Sudan a few years prior. And I was very curious, and probably maybe wasn't even the most appropriate thing to do, but I was able to have this relationship with someone who had a very different life experience from me, and who, was brought to the US because of the civil war that had been going on in Sudan when it was unified, again, many, many years ago, that gave me some perspective. And then I had that relationship so that when something was happening, I could turn to this individual and say, "Hey, what's your take on this? What's your perspective on this?" This is weird because it doesn't feel like a skill or a solution that can be applied in a really broad sense, right? It doesn't feel like, oh, we just all jump on this app and we become friends and everything's fixed, right? But I do think that cultivating and building relationships with people from other countries can be, in my very limited experience, really helpful in building that solidarity kind of internationally, because, my friend who I met at this coffee shop had family that was still back in Sudan, just as an example, right? And so he still had those connections, obviously. And then I had a connection to him, and then we could have conversations about what was going on in the world and American foreign policy, which is terrifying, right? So these are the things that are coming to mind for me right now. I don't have any great solution.
That's actually super helpful, because there are international, there are people from other countries here, and and I think everyone could maybe make more friends. I don't know, like, but I mean, thank you. That was helpful. That was very helpful.
Yeah, and I only feel like I'd be piling on. But
Oh no, man. Like,
I just want to like further underscore that the word that is used in the description for your call in is the realistic scope for internationalism in today's world. And I feel like
yeah,
we're
yeah,
talking about this in a personal way, and I think that is so important because internationalism, the way it's talked about, is often not personal. It is about a government and the government's choice to have solidarity with
yeah,
another government, whether or not the United States is going to choose to act in solidarity with Ukraine, or whether or not it's going to choose to act in solidarity with the Palestinian people or not. Whether through
yeah.
solidarity, the United States. Did you know that the United States has never recognized the any of the Armenian genocides?
I mean, who is the one UN who is the one member in the UN Council who always messes it up? Come on.
This is
Yeah,
right,
I
right.
mean,
And,
agreed.
and
Yeah,
and so us depending
yeah,
upon our country of that we're coming from to be that internationalist ambassador for solidarity, I think is such a massive problem. And I think that changing the scope to what we're doing now, making solidarity something personal, right? Our first caller today, Tim, was talking about how in the 1200s in his country, in the UK, that there was a peasant rebellion, right? And that it was solidarity with each other that enabled, the guards to unlock the doors to the castle, right? It was recognizing that shared humanity in each other that prevented that conflict, right? The example that I gave before of in France, textile workers wanting to not not be underpaid anymore. And so when they went on strike, dock workers in another country went on strike too, with them in
Mhm.
solidarity, right? I think that solidarity
yeah,
is
yeah,
personal. It needs to be
yeah.
personal. And I think that
Mhm.
I don't know what platform or way we're going to do it, but so long as we can shape the conversation in a way that keeps solidarity personal instead of depersonalizes it, it makes it the responsibility of some other country is at least that I do know. And
Mhm.
I like the fact that we're taking this personally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Nachiket,
Oh, yeah.
I know that there are like technical issues when it comes to calling from India sometimes when you call in, but whenever we do get to talk, I
I'm
nothing.
sorry if there's some like delay interruption stuff. Okay.
No. We're totally
It's
understanding.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying thank you. Thank you for calling.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, man. And thanks for the call. Thanks for the whole show. I love that the whole show has been having callers from different countries, and also the informed perspectives that people are bringing. So thank you. Thanks a lot.
Entirely agreed. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's why I like doing the show early in the day because if it's later in the day, other countries are asleep.
Mm-hmm.
We have this opportunity to have a uniquely international audience, and
Yeah.
we're opining about stuff that Trump is doing, and we have 90% of our callers are not here in the United States. I have to wonder what they're thinking, you know. But
Ooh,
it's
yeah.
right here up front of mind for us, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
God,
Absolutely.
I needed that ray of hope. I do feel like I got a ray of hope from that last call, though. Just talking about having solidarity with each other
Yeah.
feels so empowering. I love
Yeah.
it.
It's something that's always been important to me just as a person because I'm just like an inherently curious person. And so, you know, that's something that I've always intentionally sought out. And I never really thought about it in terms of like the international solidarity, but it makes perfect sense that, because it is the case now that when something happens, it's like, oh yeah, I've been reading about what's been going on, for example, in Sudan since I was like in high school, right? So a headline has context for me that it probably doesn't have for 99% of people in the US.
Yeah, I don't know anything about Sudan, so yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, solidarity gets things changed. I like that. I'm gonna walk away with that today. You know, what's funny is my first thought is the musical Hamilton. You know, that you know, it was French citizens, not a French government, solidarity with the plight of American colonists that informed French support for the United States during the American Revolution. You know, so personal solidarity changes things. It always has. I really
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Tori, I kind of want to go to the after show, go to Discord and just hang out with people. But before we do, I do want to read the super chats, and I want people to know where to find you, because you have an awesome voice and people should be able to hear from you a whole lot more often than once a month. So let me read the super chats first really quick, as I do every episode. Godless Granny sent $5 and said, "Which justice?" I believe that was in response to the family member. I don't remember, because I did not dedicate enough space in my mind to remember his name. And I'm fine with that. My Unfinished Journey sent $6.66. Thank you. And says, Hail Nero, Hail Eric. Sorry, Hail Nero, Hail Eric and Tory, and down with resegregationists. And Sean Isherwood sent £2 and says, if n is odd, then 8 divides n squared minus 1. Try to prove it. Sean, this is an ongoing thing. I sincerely appreciate it. And I'm thinking about it. If n is odd, then 8 divides n squared minus 1. I can imagine that being true sometimes, because n squared minus 1 has to be an odd number. So if n is odd, then you wouldn't imagine an even number like 8 dividing into it. But it would happen sometimes, but not every time. Unless you're saying evenly? I don't know. I'm going to think. Sorry, Tori. This is why Sean does this. Let me think about this. But while I do, Tori, how can people find you?
Yeah, let's see. So I have 2 podcasts. I have a podcast called My Homework that is about anti-racism, collective liberation, again, like U.S. history and the way that that kind of intersects with neuroscience. You can find that anywhere you get podcasts, or you can go to whitehomework.com, which is my Patreon. We're doing a patron drive right now it's Black History Month, so we're doing a patron drive. And I have another podcast called Go Home Bible, You're Drunk, that is like an ex-evangelical podcast. So for folks who have left kind of like high demand religions, and that also, you can find that anywhere that you get your podcasts. And yeah, we usually find like a weird Bible story and reread it and assess whether or not there's anything good in there or not. And, you know, sometimes we're very disappointed. Sometimes we're pleasantly surprised. You never know. The Bible's a weird book, and makes you feel like you're a little drunk when you're reading it and trying to take it literally. Yeah, and then I'm on Blue Sky right now. toryglass.bsky.social, I think is what that is. My podcasts are both on Instagram at Go Home Bible and at White Homework. Those are the main places that I think you can find me right now.
That is a lot of places, and I'm glad people can. I want to make sure that we get that information out there. You got me thinking about a couple of Bible stories, though. I'll ask you about it off air.
Do you want to come on and share your favorite Bible story?
I would love to.
Okay, sweet.
Have people talked about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego?
I'm sure we have at some point, but you know, we've been doing this for a couple of years, and also they go through the same Bible every year. So you can come on and talk about this. I don't know. I'll go look it up, and then I will text you.
There was a kid's song. I loved to sing the song. And now thinking
about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace.
Yeah. That is radicalizing in a horrifying terrorist way, and I loved that song.
I'm in the Lord's army.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No. Well, I'd love to be on.
Yes.
But I think it's time for today. So let's cue this out. If you like the show and you want to support it, please do. Consider going to patreon.com/skepticgeneration. That's patreon.com/skepticgeneration. Every little bit goes to help make this happen. And it really is bootstrapped and running tight. And we yeah. So thank you. Tori, well, we're going to talk before then, but you'll be on next month.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for joining. I'm Eric Murphy.
I'm Troy Williams Douglas.
And we're glad we had this talk.